Welcome to episode 180 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. This episode is dedicated to my dear friend Antonio, who lives in Guayaquil in Ecuador. Antonio gave me the idea to this wonderful story. It is April 29, 1971. La Plata, the reigning kings of South America, are at home. Estudiantes, winners of the Copa Libertadores in 1968, 69, and 70. The team nobody wants to face, the team that had made home nights in this competition feel almost untouchable. But the man who beats them is not one of the continent's established stars. It is a Basque missionary priest, Juan Manuel Bazurko, a Catholic father from the Basque coast, playing up front for Barcelona Sporting Club of Guayaquil, receiving a pass from Alberto Spencer and scoring the only goal in a 1-0 win that Ecuador still remembers as La Hazaña de La Plata. This is one of those football stories that sound invented, right up until you realize it happened exactly as people say it did. But how did we get here? To understand the night, you have to start with the man. Juan Manuel Bazurko Ulacia was born in Mutrico in the Basque country in 1944. As a young player, he was good enough to attract interest from Real Sociedad, but he chose the seminary instead. By 1969, he had gone to Ecuador as a missionary priest and taken charge of a parish in San Camilo in the Quevedo area. But he didn't stop playing football. He kept kicking a ball around, then playing more seriously, and then well enough that the sport followed him again. First came Liga Deportiva Universitaria de Puerto Viejo, then, with the permission of the church authorities, professional football, and then Barcelona came for him. That alone would be enough for a story, but it becomes better when you add the club he joined. Barcelona Sporting Club had been founded in Guayaquil in 1925 in the house of a Catalan immigrant, Don Eutimio Perez. Perez's Catalan origins shaped both the name and symbols of the institution, and by the mid-1950s, the club had adopted the Barca-like crest that made the relationship visually unmistakable. So Bazurko was not just playing for some Ecuadorian side, he was playing for a Guayaquil club founded by a Catalan, named after Barcelona, and carrying a crest that openly echoed the original. By 1971, Barcelona were no novelty act either. They were the Ecuadorian champions of 1970, which is why they entered that year's Libertadores, and they had built a side with real ambition. One of the most extraordinary pieces of that side was Alberto Spencer. Yes, that Alberto Spencer. The great Spencer of Peñarol, the first Libertadores dynasty, the competition's most prolific scorer, as we talked about in episode 170, now back in Guayaquil to play the closing years of his club career. So the priest and the legend were teammates. That detail alone would have felt too neat in fiction. And then there was the tournament structure. As we touched upon in episode 137, the 1971 Libertadores was played in a format that feels strange now. Estudiantes, as defending champions, entered directly into the semi-final stage. That stage was not a conventional knockout tie, but 2 3-team groups. Barcelona got there by winning their first phase group ahead of their local and fierce rivals, Emelec, plus Deportivo Cali and Junior. Then, in the semi-final group, they were placed with Unión Española of Chile and mighty Estudiantes. It was not a two-legged duel in the modern sense, but it did create a kind of mini-league loaded with pressure. The first meeting had already gone the way everyone expected. On April 18 in Guayaquil, Estudiantes won 1-0. Barcelona then beat Unión Española 1-0 on April 25, which kept the group alive and made the return to La Plata matter. But it also meant Barcelona were walking into the homes of the tricampeón at the height of their arrogance. Estudiantes had not lost the Copa Libertadores match at home. Their board members spoke dismissively about the level of the Ecuadorians. Their supporters, swollen with the confidence of 3 straight titles, had even adopted a mocking chant, "Mozo, tráigame otra copa," or "Waiter, bring me another cup." This was the atmosphere Barcelona entered. Not respect, but contempt. And Estudiantes had the players and the history to behave that way. This was still the culture built by Oswaldo Subiel-Díaz's ruthless genius. The offside trap, the gamesmanship, the tactical hard edge, the sense that Estudiantes were not merely winning, but imposing a new logic on South American football. Juan Ramón Verón was still there, the most famous attacking phase of the era, and in a longer arc, the father of Juan Sebastian Veron, whose 2009 return we talked about in episode 111. Around that world were names like Carlos Pachame, Oscar Malbanat, and the remnants of the side that had already made Estudiantes continental royalty. This was not just any home ground. This was a fortress, occupied by the dynasty of the moment. Then came the match. For an hour, Barcelona had to survive the expected script: pressure, crowd, intimidation, the slow insistence of a team that assumed the goal would come. But it never quite settled. And then, 63 minutes into the night, football took one of those turns that permanently rewrite club memory. Alberto Spencer played the pass. Bazurko ran into it, and the priest struck. A subtle touch, beating the advancing Gabriel Bambi Flores with just enough precision to send the ball home. Barcelona were 1-0 up in La Plata. Estudiantes had been hit in the place where they thought they were untouchable. And then came the phrase that made the goal immortal in Ecuador. Rato Atalia had sent commentators to Argentina, and in the delirium of the moment, the cry went out, "Benditos sean los botines del Padre Bazurko," or "Blessed be the boots of Father Bazurko." This is how football works at its best. One goal becomes a line. The line becomes folklore. The folklore becomes identity. So what did it mean? Immediately, it was a bombshell. Barcelona had inflicted the first ever home defeat suffered by Estudiantes in the Copa Libertadores. That matters not just as a statistic, but as a rupture in the emotional order of the competition. Estudiantes were supposed to win these nights. Barcelona was supposed to be the visitors who left with the lesson. Instead, Ecuador got one of the defining away wins in its club history. But the bombshell did not change the whole tournament. Barcelona did not reach the final. They still had to go to Santiago, and there they lost 3-1 to Unión Española. Estudiantes recovered, won the group, and reached the final anyway, where they meet Nacional in a repeat of the 1969 final. Estudiantes won the first leg 1-0 in La Plata. Nacional won the second 1-0 in Montevideo. So, as often happened then, a playoff on neutral ground was needed. In Lima, on June 9, 1971, Nacional won 2-0 and finally broke Estudiantes' hold on the trophy. It was Nacional's first Libertadores title and Estudiantes' first final defeat after 3 straight crowns. That gave Estudiantes a very long continental wait. They would not lift the Libertadores again until 2009. The campaign recovered in episode 111, with Juan Sebastian Veron, son of Juan Ramon Veron, leading the club back to the summit. So Bazurko's night sits in a fascinating middle chapter, after the three-peat, before the resurrection, in that in-between time when Estudiantes still looked gigantic but had begun, just slightly, to become mortal. Barcelona, meanwhile, did not turn La Plata into a dynasty either. They dipped back into the ordinary rhythms of Ecuadorian and continental football. But the club never forgot the night. It later reached 2 Libertadores finals in 1990 and 98. And on April 11, 2017, it did something wonderfully symmetrical. It won again in La Plata, beating Estudiantes 2-0 in another Libertadores group stage match. The miracle of 1971 was never fully repeated because miracles cannot be mass-produced. But the road back to La Plata had already been paved by the priest. Then there's Bazurko himself. He didn't become a superstar, didn't build a decade-long professional career out of one night. Quite the opposite. Played only a handful of matches for Barcelona, returned to San Camilo, and then to Porto Viejo, and retired from football soon after. Later he went back to Spain, left the priesthood in 73, married, had 2 children, and taught philosophy in San Sebastián. He lived, in the end, exactly the kind of quiet life you would never predict for the author of one of Libertadores' strangest and most beautiful goals. He passed in 2014. And in that too, there's something fitting. Some footballers spend 20 years building a legend. Bazurko needed 1 run, 1 pass, 1 finish, and 1 night. And Alberto Spencer? He played 1 more season with Barcelona after 1971 and retired in 72. So Bazurko's miracle goal sits not only inside Barcelona's mythology, but near the very end of Spencer's playing story. The first great story of Libertadores, helping create one last impossible chapter before walking away. That is neat. Very neat. Before we go, 3 things to take away from April 29, 1971. First, The Hazaña de La Plata is not remembered only because Barcelona won. It is remembered because they won where Estudiantes did not lose. Second, the hero matters because he shouldn't have been there at all. A Basque missionary priest turned professional footballer with ecclesiastical permission, scoring in the biggest stadium moment of his life. And third, the goal links multiple Libertadores ages at once. Barcelona of Guayaquil and its Catalan roots, Spencer from the first great dynasty, Estudiantes at the end of theirs, and the long shadow that will eventually stretch to Verón in 2009. On this day in 1971, Juan Manuel Bazurko, a Basque priest playing as a striker for Barcelona Sporting Club, scored from an Alberto Spencer pass to beat Estudiantes 1-0 in La Plata and give Ecuadorian football its most improbable continental miracle. That is all for episode 180 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. My gratitude to Antonio, who gave me the idea. If you have an idea for an episode on the show, please write me at otd@17lostguy.com. Tomorrow, we go to April 30, 1938, when a late penalty in the FA Cup final forced BBC commentator Thomas Woodruff to eat his hat. See you then.